Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. If you are new here, hello. We are so excited to have you join us today. If you are joining us again, thank you so much. And thank you for your ongoing support. It's because of listeners like you that keep us just super motivated and excited and passionate to keep bringing you these sessions. My name is Mandy Rourke, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am located in Austin, Texas. I support clients, individuals, couples, and families in Texas. And I'm also a co-founder of Zesho.
And I'm Dr. Sapna Srivastav, also a co-founder of Zesho and based in Austin, Texas as well. And welcome to Sessions. Sessions are conversations amongst clinicians. We talk about topics that are typically addressed in the mental health world so that there's the perspective of clinicians who support clients daily, easily available to all of you.
And today, our topic is about building community. And there's no better guest to have here with us than Paola. And Paola Ortiz is an LMFT in Austin, Texas, and she has an amazing group practice, the Ortiz Therapy Group. And we are especially excited to talk about community with her because we know that she's extremely passionate about prioritizing community, and we have connected with you and her, Paula, in community. And so when we were preparing for this, we were really excited to be able to talk through this topic with you because we feel like you're the community queen and we're ready for it. So we want to start by just allowing some space for you to introduce yourself today, Paula.
No, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm nervous, but I think it's just because I'm excited to talk about this with you both. So yeah, my name is Paola Ortiz. I use she, her pronouns. A couple of my identities, I'm a Latina. I'm a first generation college and master's education. I'm bilingual. I speak English and Spanish, and I offer therapy in English and Spanish. I work with individuals, couples, families. Um, my specialty is in multi-heritage couples and identities, or anybody impacted by immigration matters or just women's issues, just all the othered, oppressed, or minority identities, however people feel. And those are my passion populations. Um, and yeah, like one of the things that I really value about my work or the ability to be authentic. And I think as a practice, I've really tried to promote that value in us as a practice. And I think one of the things that we've all realized and recognized and kind of enjoyed is that we laugh a lot in our therapy sessions.
Mhm.
And so we really value humor, and that's just kind of made it its way into our practice. And so it's like, okay, being with and laughing with our clients has just made it that much of a connection, which I think leads into, conversations about the kind of communities that we can build, not only as clinicians, but as people, So I'm very excited to talk about this.
Yeah, we are so thrilled to have you. I think Mandy put it beautifully as the our community queen, at least here in Austin. And so I love that. But before we really dive into everything, we wanted to go over a few housekeeping items real fast. If you enjoy our content, please do consider liking, following, giving a positive rating and or review on any and all podcast platforms that you hear us on. These ratings and reviews help us help people find us who could benefit from the resources that we provide. Additionally, you can also find us on Instagram or TikTok at MyZesho. That's MyZessio. You can also find us on YouTube for more access to our mental health resources and for the full videos of these here conversations. And you can find more resources at our website, which is zesho.com. Again, that's zessio.com.
Has a good ring to it, doesn't
Rolls off the tongue.
it? Yeah. So when we're just kind of diving into our topic today, building community, I think there's probably a lot of different ways that people think about building community, whether that be personally or professionally. And for those of you that have been with us listening for the past several episodes, you know that we always like to start by really defining like what do we actually mean when we say building community. So let's start with that. So what does building community mean to y'all?
I can go. Well, I think one of the important aspects of building community, it sounds very active, right? But it could also, like you said, it means different things to different people, right? And so just understanding that we can define it for ourselves, and then that gives us the information that we need to, like, where can I go? Where can I seek out the type of community that would benefit me, or, the space. And so I think it's one of the biggest ways that we can not only connect but support one another, right? Like that's where we're going to find that sense of like togetherness and possibly fulfillment, right? And how we meet others and how we connect, and not just professionally, right, but personally, like our friends, our chosen family, or anybody that we share, somebody from a book club or somebody who loves plants, or anything like that, that just allows us to feel connected outside of our norm or our routine. And I think that's one of the main things that I really do think about, just connectedness, right? And feeling a sense of just away from isolation, right? Which I think a lot of people have been experiencing lately.
Absolutely. Like that sense of belonging, that you're not alone.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think hearing that people struggle with it so often these days, especially, and there's so many often barriers to it, especially in American culture, oftentimes when it tends to be very individualist based, it can be really hard to find those communities, but we also know that it can be so important to find those communities. And so we hear oftentimes, especially when we talk about like decolonizing therapy and the like, about like healing through community. And so what does that mean to y'all, and why is it so important?
Well, I think one of the things that I didn't want to forget to mention is like when we think of building community, it can, like, where can I find my people, right? Where are they? And that's a lot of work too. And the other piece that can be a lot of work is like, well, if we can't find a community of the kind that we're looking for, we can also create one, which also sounds like there's a lot of work, but like, what better way to use your voice and be like, these are the people that I want to talk to. I want to share these values. And just knowing that if you can't find one, I probably 9 times out of 10, whatever you're looking to build, people will come to that, right? I've had multiple conversations with clients who are like, this is the kind of thing I envision. I'm like, yes, do that. People will totally want to do that, right? Um, and I think that definitely goes in line with healing in community, right? That it's feeling seen, feeling supported. And I've had conversations where even that phrase might be hard to comprehend, or like, well, what does that even mean, right? And to me, it just, maybe we share an experience, or you're just validating my own experience, or giving me the space to express myself, right? As a woman of color, like with indigenous roots, I'm like, I want to be heard. I want people around me who will encourage me to speak up and to take up space, because a lot of the times, as you were saying, Sapna, the communities that we have been often don't create spaces like that, right? And we are seeking community, and that generally resonates with people that might have a collectivist background, right? And I think that that is definitely the healing piece, right? Of feeling seen and understood and encouraged to be your authentic self. Like, I think that's the heart of it from my perspective.
Mm. And I feel like as you're saying that, and I'm thinking about just therapy in general too, it is interesting to see how individualistic therapy can be too. I mean, I know that speaking for all of us a little bit here, like I know we all tend to think very systemically about our work as licensed marriage and family therapists, but I do see a struggle where so many of my clients have felt just so alone. And I mean, Paula, you were already saying this a little bit before of like, the pandemic was no joke. And it's still, I mean, people are getting COVID a ton, and it's triggering and it's hard. And it just continues to remind us
Mhm.
what that isolation really did do for us. And so as I think about healing in community, I think about how it's almost like this process that we have to learn again of like, how do we feel safe in community?
Mhm.
Because there was so long that, I mean, we all can remember this, that it's like, do not like leave your home. And it was so hit into us that that is unsafe, that is unsafe. And so even the act of like, how can I heal through community is like, I have to like first recognize what makes me feel safe in community. And to what you're describing, it's like, am I sharing similar values and identities with the people that I am with, but also like, what's the safety parameter there? I mean, that still feels like a very big sticking point for some clients that I support of like, I don't know, it feels weird to get back out there. And how do I do that? Almost like I'm having to learn how to do it again. So it's like, I want to heal through community, but also like, oof, that's like a little bit of a task ahead. I mean, do y'all
Mhm.
sense that or feel that at all either?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and especially considering what you said as well, Paula, of finding community where you also have overlapping identities with some of them,
Mhm.
and just recognizing that a lot of the experiences that you've had are not just isolated to you, they're not just individual experiences that you've had on your own. Many of them are also very universal in communities with people with similar identities as well. And so to me, kind of that's one invitation towards safety in
Mhm.
community in that way, and healing in the community in that way as well. Um,
Yeah.
one of many, I would hope. But yeah, like I think definitely considering where you can find that safety within community is really huge. And kind of being, like you said, also, Paula, of like being one to create that safety as best you can too, while honoring what you need to create that for yourself as well, can
Mhm.
be another avenue.
Yeah. And, you know, as both of you were talking, you know, the challenges with COVID and how that's presented itself, and then, you know, overlapping identities. I also thought about even pre-pandemic, right? Recently, I don't know the name or the title of the study, but it was basically the summary was that we're lonelier, you know, just as people, we're lonelier. And we have, I don't know at this point how many avenues for staying connected: Instagram, TikTok, all the apps, right, to stay connected, but somehow we're more disconnected than ever. We're lonely. The conversations I'm having with my clients, it's like, well, I've initiated, but it's not reciprocated. I acknowledge that the world is struggling, right? And everybody has their own issues, but also, what about, you know, what about me, or what about our relationship or our friendship? And so there is a lot of isolation, despite people thinking that, oh, we're totally connected. We send memes every day. Wow, that's very important at this point too. It alleviates a lot of stress in a lot of ways, but there's still, and maybe I feel like sometimes when I say this, I sound old school, but there's just something about getting together face to face, or there's something about a phone call where you can do chores in the background and just talking to your friend, or catching up, or just that sense of being with, right? I feel like connects all of that. And to all of the COVID challenges that came up, absolutely, right? And it was political, right? And who can you trust? What does safety mean? What does health mean? Are you being safe? Can I trust you? And all of these weird, like, complications, and just feeling isolated versus, do I trust this other person who's partying it up and is not taking precaution, right? And having those difficult conversations, because we had to be very mindful when reconnecting. We had to really assess the situation in ways that we didn't know that we could, right? And so coming out to whatever community you identify with, it's like, well, is this okay? Just that constant questioning, right? And sense of safety. And it's harder than it looks. Like, we can easily say, go find your community. Well, what does that even look like, right? How can I define it? And so, absolutely, it's been very hard
Yeah.
post pandemic, you know, but
I worry I'll go on too big of a tangent here, but in the theme of social media, I've thought, I mean, I've talked about a client, another client like this week, right? Where it's like like there are benefits of it, right? Like, and I think social media was meant to be this like forum to feel like you belong and to have community, but it is such a double-edged sword that a lot of what I seem to kind of process with people too is like, I'm going, like, I do feel connected, right? Like, my friends maybe live in other states, and so I can connect with them
mhm,
in these ways, but then the constant stimuli of seeing what other people are doing, then it's that FOMO, that can hit in pretty badly, of like the fear of like, look how much community they have. I don't have as much community, as an example, or I like, how do they have so many friends, or how are they always doing all these cool things? And so
Mhm.
it is interesting, and how complex that is, because I know that, so many people can benefit from it, but it's almost feels like, I mean, if we could really study it, is it like a 50-50 split of like the pros and cons of what's really
Mhm.
offered there? But I did, per social media, probably see someone's post about this where it's like, when you do get that ick when you're looking at social media, or that FOMO, that is actually a good starting place for its information of like, if there's something that you're like, man, like I wish I could do that, or like maybe the envy of like others being able to do certain things, that's a good starting point of like, how can I replicate that in my own life versus just feel sad about, maybe that comparison of
Mhm.
what someone has versus what I have. It's like I can actually kind of work with this a little bit, and try to figure out, going back to what you were saying earlier, Paula, of like, how do I actually create my own community and my own version with my own people? And it can be very unique and beautiful and
Mhm.
small or big or whatever that might look like too. So I don't
Yeah.
know, social media, love, hate, but it's also maybe could be a starting place in that respect, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. You reminded me of like, after conference that I went to recently. There was a presentation regarding like teaching, supervising, and using AI or something like that. And I was like, oh, that sounds scary. But then at the end, the presenter, Sally Hababa, who's amazing, she said it's not so much the app or the AI that's the issue. It's our relationship to it and
Mm,
how we use it and the intention behind that, right? Yes, the apps are there to connect. Is that what you're doing with it, right? And then at what point does it become, okay, I'm picking up my phone 100 times a day? Is it because I want to connect, because I want to scroll,
right.
right? But anyways, I will not get into the social media tangent, but yeah, like hopefully people do use it because that creates access, right? Connect us across states, borders, and all of that. But yeah, there's something to be said for acknowledging in what other ways we can connect that is different, from online.
Yeah,
The kind of benefits that we can really see from that connection with our friends and family.
Mhm.
truly. I definitely resonate with kind of what both of y'all are saying with kind of the fatigue that comes with just connecting via screens constantly. And like we had no choice but for so long during the pandemic. And even now, I think like my own nervous system is struggling to kind of like reacclimate to like using that as a primary source. And I feel often drained by just connecting via screens, whether it's social media or even text sometimes and email and that sort of thing. And so just kind of also acknowledging our capacities and also like what does energize us when we do find and create community. And I mean, I know for me personally, a lot of that often does come in person when we can do so safely. But there's also so many other considerations around that as well. Health considerations, as well as like many clients that I've worked with have this desire for connecting with other people, as well as some pretty deep-seated social anxiety as well. And there's just so much at war with one another that can really become a struggle in creating or connecting with community in ways that are energizing as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that definitely falls into remembering that community or belonging to a community can have so many different meanings, right? And maybe some people imagine this idea of, oh, it's a party. Oh, it's a big gathering with all these other people, but it doesn't have to be, right? It could be your community could be these two other friends or this one friend who you happen to go and sit with and be like, hey, I'm going to be your couch friend today where we're going to sit here and relax, right? There, and I've had multiple conversations with my clients about, well, what does it mean to show up as myself, right? What's been my role? What's been the narrative around my role about who I'm supposed to be? And one of the particular conversations, like, well, back when I was 20, I would do all these things and I had all this energy and I could come back and work and go to school. And it's like, that changes. how can we accommodate that, right? And your communities will change, your activities will change, your hobbies will change. And so acknowledging that that shift is gradual and that it'll always happen, I feel like there could potentially be such a relief, like, oh, I can show up differently. I can create a community where we all just hang out and lounge in PJs. That's my fantasy, right? We're just relax and lay down comfortably, and we're just chatting if we want to. And I think that's why I come back to defining it for yourself, right? And for like, there's just so many things that you could do that don't have to fit into a specific mold, right? So when we are talking about creating community, well, what does that look like to you? And starting those conversations with other people. Well, what do you think it means? What do you want to do? Right? Does it mean not being in a commute for 40 minutes to try and get to a place? Probably not. That'll definitely deter me. Right? And so, and being able to voice that is okay. Right?
I appreciate that so much, because I do feel like as you're describing that, it's helping me as a reminder too, because somewhere along the way, I do think that, maybe it was reinforced and like being part of teams, or, in athletics or something, or like there's different like clubs within schools or whatever it may be, where it always kind of in the back of my mind, I think of community as like it's a group type of activity, or and I think that a lot of clients actually probably share in that too, especially like people that have moved to Austin and they're looking to make friends, that it's like, do I have to go to these meetup groups and be with people who all want to do screenplay writing, or can I just find like a friend? And so I do think that's such a helpful, almost just grounding kind of concept here for people to be like, what does it actually mean to you? And it goes back to, if I'm thinking about it for myself, it's like, where do you feel like you belong the most? It's not about quantity, it's about the quality of those connections. And you get to decide where you find those connections, and get creative with it too, right? It could just be like you said. I mean, that does sound like a dream. Like we just lay and binge watch our favorite shows together, and we don't have to talk at all because we've been talking all week, and that's totally fine. Like that can be community because you feel like connected and that you belong. And so I appreciate that so much. And I'm curious of like any other struggles that we haven't touched on when it comes to community too. I know we've kind of touched on the social anxiety piece of this, and maybe in alignment with that, there's, Paula and I texted once about like social battery, of like, what's my social battery at? Like today, am I able to, make that commute, or do I have the capacity to connect, or do I need to kind of go more inward? And then I'm saying a couple things here at the same time, but also it makes me think about like introversion versus extroversion too, of like, how do you feel charged? Because I know that many clients that I work with that are introverted, the idea of community may be that they're at home and they are sending memes. And that's sufficient,
Yeah. And I think that that's like the social expectations, I think, change over time, over people, over, our backgrounds and such. And so checking in like, hey, I've been finding this fulfilling. What do you think? Right. And then that just confirms like, okay, this is a good space for us. I know one of the challenges that I found with some of my clients who have either moved to or from Texas, right, and being able to find a place that is often like, I want somewhere that's diverse, or I want someone who looks like me. I want somebody who is interested in these things, who also looks like me, right? And well, we're in Texas, right? And sometimes that might not be how it feels, right? Even though all of us, we're in Austin at this time, right? And we provide services for everybody around Texas. It's not everybody might have that kind of access, right? And where safety might be a concern, right? Or just access in general, right? Whether that's physical or not, that it's okay to take that into account, right? That also overlaps in this conversation about building community. And then if we don't feel safe, then that then contributes to, well, then I should isolate, right? And then that leads into more of the same. It's just like a vicious cycle. If I isolate, I'll be safe, but then I'll be away from people or my family. What does that look like? And that could be COVID. That could be 2016 elections, right? Well, I have to be alone, or I shouldn't be in public, or, things that we're concerned about also overlap with the kind of community that we want to be a part of. And that it's perfectly reasonable for us to voice that too, right? Okay, you know what? I'm not feeling very safe in this space, and I just want to verbalize that. I'm staying out, right? And it's just being able to check in what not only your social battery, but how are you feeling safety wise, and that it's okay to share that with the community that you're a part of because they see you, they validate that experience and concern, and who knows, they may or may not feel the same, right? And I think that's a really important part about knowing whether or not you have found a community that respects that and sees it. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of good feedback that you can get in both checking in with yourself and also kind of seeing how the people in the community that you're joining kind of respond to you in that way and assessing how much safety you find. But I also want to echo Mandy's sentiment earlier of like, I appreciate that we keep bringing it into like create and find what works for you in the definition that you want and need. It doesn't have to be subscribing to like a broader idea that culture has or the society has maybe imposed on us of what community does or needs to look like. It really can be whatever is right for you. And you have a little more agency than you might realize in that too. Kind of going back to that example that you were giving, Mandy, earlier of even with social media, if you're finding yourself feeling jealous, like how do you use that as something that, okay, I can control this much. So maybe I can take a step towards, inviting some other person out for even just like a book club, like a silent book club type of thing of like, we just read together in person type of thing. And so I really also appreciate that as well and wanted to highlight that yet again.
Well, something that just came to mind too is I feel like there's different seasons of community too. I mean, I'll speak for myself that I've noticed not newfound social anxiety, but a renewed sense of social anxiety when it comes to creating community, specifically through my phase of life and having a young child. And I'm like, oh man, like I gotta meet all these new people. And I don't want to say it, it sounds like I'm like a chore, right? But like from an anxiety lens, it does kind of feel that way a little bit of like I need to kind of put myself out there for my kids so that I can help create community for her. But also within that, like I want to ensure, going back to what Paula, what you're saying is like, I want to make sure I'm creating a community that aligns with the values of our family and our home that feels safe and that will be connecting for her and be positive, like a positive influence on her, but then also on us. And at the same time, it's a stretch. It's a stretch to have to go out there and it makes me feel like almost like a adolescent again. Like I need to make new friends and how do I make new friends and what do you talk about? What do you not talk about? How much do I share about my life and how do I develop a trusting relationship? And it's like I'm a therapist. I work with clients all day long and I cultivate these trusting relationships. Yes, but that's from a professional like perspective. But when it comes to that personal community, it's tricky because it is a phase of life that's requiring more effort, right? But it's also, there's a beautiful like gift that is received by putting that out there, but it does feel like the anxiety can be pretty real there and can also cause hesitation to, even when it comes to like scheduling play dates, I'm like, okay, let's do this, or like colleagues up at my office, a completely different season, right? I'm in a new office space. How do I connect with people? It's like, what do I do? I'm like, I feel like I ought to know how to do this, but I still have to like think about like, do I invite them to lunch with me? Do we go out and have drinks? Like, what's the protocol here? Can someone just tell me exactly like do these things and then check you've made those relationships. Now you can continue to build on those, but I feel like I'm not alone in that because I certainly collaborate with my clients on that too of like, yes, when your kids get older and they graduate, you have to find a whole new set of friends because that community shifts, So I'm kind of going all over the place with different seasons and such, and anxiety along the way because it's transition, right?
Yeah, it's just going to shift all the time and our interests are going to change. Our availability, something as logistical as that, right? And so, and it's important. And if it's like, you'll make an effort when and if you can, and knowing what our bandwidth is. And I feel like that's always just such a sense of relief, like, oh, it's okay if I don't want to. I can give myself permission to do that. And then when you do that, that gives other people permission. I have a really fun colleague who loves to say, she's like, I love making plans and I love canceling them. So cancel them at any time. And there's just so much freedom in that. We're like, okay, cool. We're excited right now. We're amped up to make more plans. And then, the day comes and we don't know what we're going to feel like that day. We don't know, or it goes back to our battery, right? Or how things are going. And that's okay to check in on that. So yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that's a good reminder too. Like you can make the plan, but you can also cancel them, and there is no shame in that game.
Let us
Because
normalize
whoever
that.
is part of my community would be accepting of that response.
Exactly.
It goes back to how we value one another and what's important. So coming full
Yeah.
circle there.
Yeah.
With like the internal, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm spacing on this word. The introvert in me, you're like, I get to lay down in my pajamas again. And that's okay. But knowing that there's no anxiety between you or that friend or between you and that group, right? If you're in a group chat, it's like, oh, you're totally good. Take care of yourself. That is just like a warm hug, just as meaningful as getting together. Just giving yourself permission to do that.
Truly. Truly. And I think along those lines, just one other struggle in creating and building community that really, I think, aligns with this kind of sentiment that is worth also mentioning is just mental health generally, but also like we've mentioned anxiety. Depression is also definitely a factor that's involved. And so kind of tying that back to what you're saying about the seasons of like, there's going to be these seasons, these days where like, you just need to stay in bed and stay horizontal solo. And like, it can just mean a lot to have a friend just send a check-in text of like, hey, thinking of you. If you need anything, like, I'm right here. Just reach out, or I can come by and just say hi and check in on you or what have you. And so definitely multiple different seasons, definitely changes day to day in our mental health and our capacity. And so definitely loving the idea of normalizing, like it is okay if we cancel and it's okay if we take care of ourselves and we find the community that's okay with that and understands, like, again, very much a warm hug for sure.
Yeah. Right now that you were saying that, I thought about, I was like, oh, and also that we don't just belong to one community. You can belong to as many as you'd like, right? I have my therapy friends, I have my non-therapy friends, I have my people that I'm connected to from college or my bestie from elementary school, right? And these are all different people, right? Again, it goes back to you assessing like, how do I want to spend my day, right? And you just ask yourself those questions that you give yourself permission to be part of whatever community works best in that moment, feeds your soul or makes you feel rested, right? Or refills your battery. And because I know a lot of our conversations are about friendships, but those friendships is what cultivates the community, right? Thinking about it systemically, like that is what then invites others to feel comfortable and to join and to be their authentic self. And just you can belong to as many, depending on your mood, so.
I love that. And when you were saying that, what popped into my head is like this experiential type of exercise, more like art-based, where when you were just describing, like it almost like I saw these different colors of like almost like the different petals of community in your life, right? Where it's like, and maybe it would be, if someone's listening to this, that's like, this is pulling at them and they really are curious about what creating community could look like for them. It could be fun just to sit down, get some watercolors, and just kind of like draw out, like, my interests are animals, for instance. Like, that's going to be this wing of this flower or this petal of this flower, and just kind of have fun with, like, I have these friends. And sometimes even visually seeing it could be pretty affirming as well. Like, when you were just saying that, you're like, wow, like, you've got a pretty awesome, array of community that you cultivated for yourself. And I'm sure that even being able to recognize that from the start could be helpful. Like I'm not starting from like nothing here. Like I have some sense of community and here's some like, maybe I want to add a couple petals over here, a couple leaves down on the stem that will help me feel more grounded and connected within myself. So I don't know, that just kind of popped into my mind. And now I kind of want to do a little art project with my daughter, see what we can do here. I think in that same lens though, it would be good to talk about what can happen when we don't have community because it's kind of similar to some of what we're describing as far as like there is struggle behind it, but what comes up for you when I ask that question of like what can happen when we don't have community or we don't have any emphasis on that maybe?
Mm. Like if I take it back to like historical, there's this other presentation that I'd gone to a couple of years back where they talk about like they're talking about the differences between individualistic and collectivistic cultures and talking about like why that was in the first place. And they're like, well, collectivist was a way of surviving, right? Or like those phrases that say it takes a village or whatever, right? It's like, well, it's necessary, right? Because majority of the time, these populations or people with this culture that it's like that was necessary, right? Not always because that's what they felt they wanted, but it's just like we have to do this. We have to take care of each other or take turns or to do that. And so at the baseline, I would say, and like generations and generations behind us, it's survival. But then also, I think we're finally getting to a point where we recognize that we can enjoy ourselves, that we can truly rest and be happy with that, despite how difficult it is, right? Considering the society that we're in, where you have to produce, like it's just capitalism and the patriarchy and all that stuff is just continuously pressures us to be on and to be working and to be doing all of the things, right? And so I think when we're without community and if we feel like we're not being productive enough, there's a lot of negative critical thinking and talking that we're doing to ourselves, like you should have done more, you should have networked, you should have done, and all of these horrible things that we have heard other people say to themselves, right? Or things that have been promoted in other places. And so there can be a lot of shame, there can be a sense of overwhelm. How do I even get out of this? Or even from the mental health perspective, right? With symptoms of depression or anxiety, it's like it feels like there is no way to get out of that. And so if you don't know anybody else who might be going through that similar experience, well, how are you supposed to know how to get out of it? Right. And so it can be I think it can be a really scary place, which is, my hope and the goal with this conversation. It's like, it is incredibly hard and it sometimes does take time. But when you find the people that you're comfortable with and the places that you feel seen and empowered, that'll slowly and gradually will get you out of that space. But that's kind of the main thing that I do think about without.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that comes to my mind is like a feeling of being both burdened and often feeling like a burden yourself and wanting to like feeling like you need to protect others from the burdens that you carry. And when it's quite the opposite, when like we need and deserve a sense of community to be able to carry that together and to be able to survive together, like you were saying, Paula, like it's truly we're not meant to carry everything on our own. And I think of like the example of kind of that you hear of like one of many examples, but of even like an adult, like functioning adult meant to work 40 hours a week and maintain a household and, take care of errands and bills and maintain friendships and have a pet or God forbid have children and a spouse and a partner or what have you. And like
I am stressed.
Right, right.
That.
And
Yeah.
that's not meant for one person to handle solo. That's intended to be a unit of people to be able to help you carry that. And so kind of those acknowledging those expectations that are so often put on us, like you said, Paula, by the capitalistic society or expectations of the patriarchy or what have you, like it's not realistic for us to handle solo. And so you're allowed to ask for help. Like you deserve it. You need it. Like we're wired for connection. That's an inherent part of who we are as humans. And without it, it's just a struggle and people find ways to cope, but just because they can doesn't mean they should.
I'm really glad you brought that up. It made me think about my work with couples and how I've worked with a lot of premarital cases or couples that are preparing for long-term commitment. And It's been interesting because, some people, it's that notion from Jerry Maguire from old time, like a long time ago, where it's like you complete me, and this person is meant to be the one that serves every need, and the two of you are now. That's it. That's all you need is just this one person, and it's like, oh, Jerry Maguire. That's a long time
No.
ago. I haven't seen it in a minute, but anyways, that's that line. And
Yeah.
so many conversations in couples therapy, and this is stuff that goes from comes from Esther Perel too, because she brings in a lot of what you were talking about culturally speaking, Paula, as far as like the village mentality and like the origin of relationships. We're not meant to be like you have one person that's your romantic love and that's it. But there has been such a like social conditioning that's happened. Maybe we can blame it all on Jerry Maguire in that one movie, probably not. But the point is that relationships suffer when it's only when there is that perspective of like, okay, I have my partner and I have maybe my kids and that's enough, right? And it's like that's not really how relationships thrive. That's certainly not how intimacy thrives from what Esther Perel talks about. And so that came to mind really strongly as you were talking about that, Sepna, because that may be almost like a stretch for some people, though, if they've seen that modeled for them too, of like, we're just a tight-knit family and we don't really rely upon others. And, again, it goes back to you can do whatever you want. You can decide whatever works for you. But there is also like some validity to kind of talking about the the benefits of not just relying upon the people within your home to be that source of community, or for my partner to be my everything, right? Like our relationship is stronger because of like what you're talking about, Paula. I have my other wings of my life that help me feel really fulfilled as a human, so then I can show up as a human with him, right? So just something to kind of bring in from the family and relationship lens too. I think it's pretty major.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you reminded me of something. When we think about communities or for people who are married or in a committed relationship or when they have kids or if they live with extended family, I'm curious if like that might mean like, okay, if I'm gonna find community, then that means all of us. And it may or may not be that, right? Or it may or may not be you and your partner or you and your kids. And if there is access, right? If there is, the privilege of being able to say, well, I'm going to take time for myself as an individual, right? And go seek out my friend to do this or go do painting with the twist and have some fun. Or actually, this is a kid friendly event. We're going to go with other parents and things like that. And just knowing that that is also okay, right? So it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, I think we get stuck when we are in any particular role that that's all we are, right? And so we can show up at different places, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to figure out how to bring this in, but it feels so important to me I was telling both of y'all right before we started of the blue zones. I'm like really insistent about bringing this in, that the blue zones is a book slash a study where there are different zones in the world where there's a higher population of centenarians, and one of the common themes along with like movement and certain like foods and things like that was their involvement in community. And so it just to not forget to bring that up when you were talking about the survival piece of this. While living to be 100 would be amazing, it's also, I found that so interesting though, that those zones across multiple different cultures and parts of the world, the common theme was that they were involved in community. And so I think maybe that would be a good place to kind of like bridge over to like specific examples of being involved in community, because as I'm thinking about this one that was like, I think it was in Greece, they were involved in more of the community of like their village, where they had certain duties and kind of going back to the roles that they were responsible for carrying out within their smaller village, which obviously looks very different in American cultures. But maybe that would be good for us to kind of talk on too, of like, what are some good specific ways that you can be involved, like from a professional or personal, just to give anyone who is looking for like, I want to be involved in community, but I don't really know what that looks like for me, but give me some hints, you know?
Yeah. As you were sharing that, I kept thinking about like, well, there must be a sense of like being community, getting that fulfillment, feeling useful, feeling like you contribute, feeling a meaningful connection with why you're there, right? And as we get older, people are like, oh, you get older, you get wiser. I'm like, oh, sometimes. But I imagine the people that are there and have reached that, I keep every now and then when I'm scrolling, I'll see like, older people being interviewed, like, well, what would you tell your younger self? What, and connection, I imagine, would be at the top, how relationships matter. And I would imagine that, there's just a lot of fulfillment in that kind of space. And I think of my grandmother, I think she's 90 on my mom's side, and she's just living her best life and she just does what she wants. And I'm gonna have to ask her, like, how are you involved in your community? And just see, she lives in Mexico, but it's like she has like a little farm and she just, does whatever she wants. I was like, I hope I get there when I'm 90. What keeps her motivated and just wanting to be involved, so that'd be kind of
Well, on that note, it
interesting.
reminds me of a family member who has since passed, but he was, in his late 90s, and every day they would meet up for coffee. There would be 5 or 6 gentlemen that would go and have coffee every day. I mean, to me, that's a version of community for sure, and it's an involvement
Mhm.
of like, they go to they frequent those local businesses, they know people, and I think it does. It's a sense of belonging, but I also think that there's that purpose of like I need to show up for Joe or whoever is there. That connection, like you said, I think is great. I would love to have that. Like this is just what we do every morning. We walk to the city center and have our coffee, or you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being a regular somewhere,
Mhm.
where they know you, they know your name.
Where everybody knows your name. I think that's
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's another sense of community too, like supporting local proprietors and kind of connecting with them and that's another sense um of meaning and belonging in and of itself as well. But I also like that example too that you gave, Mandy, of like your family member, and like that consistency piece, I think can often be really helpful to maintain, whether it is every morning or it is like a monthly book club or, biweekly happy hour or what have you. And I feel like that could be professionally or personally. But if you can kind of establish that, maybe you take the initiative in establishing that and just kind of invite and be ready to be like, I can commune with myself as well if no one can make it.
Mhm.
But, try and invite that for others or kind of assess like, what would you like in community and how can that be consistent and authentic for you? um and yeah, speaking of authentic, like finding ways that truly are kind of going back to our earlier conversation, like things that do feel helpful and fulfilling and meaningful for you. And you might have to get a little creative about what that looks like, and for some people that could mean like, you know playing video games with virtual friends all
Mhm.
across the world on the weekends, and that's a huge sense of community for many people,
Mhm.
and especially one that we've been able to get creative with when we were limited in meeting in person as well, but also that is a lot more accessible for people too. um yeah, what are other ideas for building community together?
Let's see. Well, I'm currently part of a book club. I remember thinking after grad school, I was like, I don't want to read. And the first time I tried to pick up a book, I wanted to highlight it, and I was like, this isn't right. So I took my time. Like, it's not time yet, right? And so anything that you can think of, whether it's a mental health event or networking or something like that, or conversations like these,
Mhm.
it's like, are you interested? Are you even interested? Do you want to talk about this? Do you want to read this book? Right? There feel like they're common sense questions, but I think we forget to ask ourselves that, right? Do I really want to read this? Things like that. Um, and so whenever I think about like in a professional space, all the books you see behind me, I have started, but I have not finished. But one book that I did finish was The Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey. And she has like on Instagram and Facebook, she has the page, the Nap Ministry, and she's always like emphasizing
I love that
rest
page.
and that resting is okay in community. right? I think one of her main projects, possibly in grad school, I hope I'm not getting this wrong, she was cultivating physical spaces where people could go rest together and people would go sleep in these like big warehouses just to be with other people who wanted the same. It's super cool. So I would highly encourage people to read it. But yeah, like in a professional community where it doesn't have to be, again, it goes back to we get to define what those spaces look like, right? And I think whenever the three of us have gotten together, that I'm hopeful that it does feel that way, that it is a sense of collaborative conversation where we get to be ourselves and show up as human beings, even though we met as clinicians, right? And that's where things start to develop into something else, right? Like, well, what if we did this? Or what if we didn't do that and we just, had coffee on a morning, right? And just being able to do that, have the liberty to really say what you feel, what you're feeling in that moment, what sits with you, right? And so, but yeah, those are just some of the things that I was thinking about.
On the same note of professional community, for me, it was, and we talked about this a lot in grad school. They were always like, get a consultation group, get a consultation group. And I was like, I mean, if I'm working at a group practice, I'll see people, but the office, like, what's the importance behind that? But for our clinician friends that are listening to the podcast, I'm sure that, for many, there is probably that draw to, I want to feel connected to other clinicians to be able to confidentially, of course, like process through my work with clients and to not have to carry the weight of the needs of my clients alone. And so for me, that has been something that a few years ago, I created just very collaboratively, along with a few other clinicians, just a small little consultation group. And it's, as you were saying, Paula, it started off as more of like, all right, we are going to have a professional consultation group. And then the beauty of showing up authentically is that it feels like these are friends of mine now, like they're allies of mine in life and in therapy, where I look forward to these conversations with them about work stuff, but also I'm like, let's meet up and have some dinner and not talk about work stuff. And so that's a great place. And I mean, I'm thinking about this through the therapist lens, but I also think about a lot of my clients who, professionally speaking, like work in virtual environments. And I think that can be kind of tricky because they don't have that face-to-face interaction. They have like, all right, hop on in this meeting and then this meeting. And so we've definitely talked over, course of many years, be it before or after pandemic, of how can you create something that you were saying, that consistent, like every second Friday or every 2 weeks, we have some sort of like coffee date that we have, or we have like happy hour game date, where that's something where it's like, it's not about work, it's just about being people, and that we're all in this organization together and we're all striving to work towards the same goal and things like that. So those are some of the ideas that come to mind for professional. If there's any other for that, or maybe we can add some ideas for personal, for community too.
Yeah, I think just what was coming to mind, that's like an underlying theme that I know that we as marriage and family therapists who utilize a systemic lens know and kind of are thinking about as we're having this conversation, is just like expanding your system. Like that's just kind of a tenet of family systems theory or systems theory generally. And that came to mind, especially like in creating a consultation group. Whenever you get stuck, if you just expand your system, have other people that you can consult with, like it can bring in fresh energy and ideas that can unstuck, that you can utilize and you kind of move through a little more easily. And I think that's kind of a tenet that can work in any other places. And so kind of talking about like ideals for creating more personal community, I did go to a book signing recently for, if you're at all familiar with the account, Brown Girl Therapy, that author, Sahaj Kohli, she has written a book. It's amazing. She also had a moderator there, who's written a book on self-care. Her name is Pooja Lakshani, I think. Forgive me if I butchered the last name. We'll include it in the show notes. But I was able to ask both of them kind of their ideas of like how to expand community, because thinking about like working with clients and how we all kind of struggle in finding ways and opportunities to create community. And so one thing that they did mention is, if you have children involved in any way, like a good, easy example, kind of like you were talking about earlier, Mandy, is like connecting with other parents that are at your kids' events. Not that that doesn't come with its own struggles, oftentimes too. But it can be an easy avenue of like places that you're already going to be in with your kids, if it's like after school activities or extracurricular, like sports, what have you. You're already going to be communing with these people, just kind of making an effort to kind of feel out who might be someone that you can connect with. Um, Also kind of the meetup groups are an option as well. And then they also suggested um kind of third party groups. So for example, like the YMCA or YWA. And like even if you're just going there to do a solo activity, but you're doing it around other people, that can be a great first step of just feeling like you're not isolated and alone, and that you're able to enjoy this activity that you were hoping to do anyways or wanted to enjoy, and do it with other people who are doing the same. And then kind of, especially if you struggle with like social anxiety or feeling apprehensive about really talking to someone and striking up a conversation, like taking a baby step at each time you go, of like just making a casual comment to someone else, even if they don't respond back. You're just allowing that door to open for engaging, or asking someone a question, or maybe you work your way up to, hey, want to race, like what have you. But those can definitely be some examples that they mentioned that I really appreciated, that, so shout out to them for sure.
Yeah.
Makes me think of like
Yeah.
trivia nights or, painting classes or art classes, music lessons, like just really tapping into like and this goes back to values too, as far as like what are the things that charge you? I used the example of animals earlier, and I mean, I'm thinking about Austin because we have so many different like rescue and different organizations of like every Tuesday I go and I walk the pups, and then you get to
Oh,
know the people that work there. Or, like we go to Taco Tuesday at the same place every time. That consistency I think is what's helpful. And as you were saying that, Sapna, about just taking those baby steps too, it made me think about whenever I went to the new gym over by our house. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to a workout class. I'm gonna try it because it's like a little intimidating because you're like, do these people go every week? And I'm the newcomer, and they were so incredibly welcoming. They like made space for me, and so I just also want to share that like it's not your responsibility to make others, accommodate their comfort. That's not the point. But I will say that it was so well received that I was like, y'all are so friendly and thank you. And it did make me feel like I belonged right from the start. And then I didn't have any of those nerves in working out with all of these strangers, right? I was like, I belong here because they made space for me at the bar. But I think it's like a two-way street, right? Like I can just say those subtle hellos or like a thank you even as just a way of like, re-engaging with community. And I know I'm maybe being repetitive when it comes to the pandemic stuff, but like there is just like that re-entry that I know I've experienced. I know a lot of my clients have experienced of just like, how do we get back more familiar about like talking to the people who are like helping us at the grocery store and just making, those like building relationships that are not transactional, really. It's more about like, hello, human. Hello, human. And we're all in this together at the end of the day.
yeah.
But I know,
Yeah.
Paula, you had some other good ideas too when it came to personal community.
Oh, well, I mean, as both of you were talking, I also wanted to mention like validating that it's a risk. Small step or big step, right? It's all a risk. It's an emotional one, it's a mental one. It's just scary overall, right? Whether it's the pandemic or not, or even before that, right? But it is a risk and it's scary. And so to validate that, but if you end up feeling like you did right after, it's like, oh, this was really nice. It was scary and that doesn't go away. That experience is there, but you had a good time, right? Which just reminded me of similar experience that I had. So this a plug for the gym that I go to. It's the Austin Women's Boxing Club, and they are just incredible. Like
Awesome.
it's amazing. And so it's just like being able to show up to a place again where you can be yourself consistently. If you're having a bad day, if you want to show up and just hit some stuff, right? And it's all welcome, right? And that, yeah. So it's whenever it's already established a community, knowing what the culture is like, right? Knowing how they are represented. And there are ways that some communities do outwardly say, hey, this is a safe space. Hey, all are welcome, right? Those things are also very important. And they're generally like telling you that this is a safe space, if that's something that is important to you. So I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, I think especially for us who live in Austin, some of my clients who live in Austin as well, I think of like, well, there's all these general websites that talk about free events too, because access to me is really important. And, some of my clients that I work with might not have, money to travel and to do all these things. And they might want something that's accessible to them, right? And then that's free. And so um, the other thing I can think of is like farmers markets. I feel like as I explore that as an adult, I'm like, oh, this is fun. I really enjoy this. And it is a big sense of community, even though I don't know anybody, right? But when you're going up, you're talking to vendors and they're very excited and passionate about what they're making and what they're selling, and they want to talk to you about it. Again, that builds rapport, that builds relationship. And you're like, I'm going to go back to this person, right? And after the pandemic and re-entering to society in a sense, I found out about Frida Friday, and so it's like co-partnered with Las Ofrendas. That's what it's called, but it's basically like it's described as Austin's first and only monthly intentionally intersectional BIPOC, queer, Latin, and local creative centered markets. And anytime that I go, and they have them all over the city, different times. And I know Frida Friday it's not just on Fridays, it happens throughout the week. But they're just such fun places that I'm always recommending it to friends and clients. Like, I promise you, that's diverse in every capacity. And, the goal is to build community where people feel welcome and at home. And especially if this isn't their home, right? My parents are immigrants, and finding a community that feels safe and like there's other people who look like you, or they're selling things like you, or that you would like, and things like that. It's just, there's something really special about that. And so just to find more of that can be really cool. And take a friend, right? And then that just kind of builds on that, and the word spreads, and then that everybody starts to communicate about, there's this really cool thing that I did, and it was fun and safe and kid friendly, family friendly, all friendly. And so those are some of the things that I thought of that have really strengthened the community that I'm a part of, because I always get really excited about the things that I share with other people that I care about. Like, I promise you, you will like this. It will be fun, right? In whatever capacity they can show up. But yeah, those are the main things that I always encourage others to try out.
I love that. I think Frida Friday sounds amazing. And I know you've mentioned it before and still have to go, but definitely started following them. And I'm so excited to check it out, especially as being such an intentionally inclusive space, and like all are welcome, which again, talking about that safety and finding that is huge, huge, huge. I also wanted to throw in one more thought, because I know just generally like finding community, yes, and also just making friends as an adult is very, very difficult and challenging. And so I really do appreciate things like, I know we talked about apps and screens are really hard, but they can be used intentionally. Like you were saying, Paula, of like how you use it can be really helpful. So things like Bumble BFF, for example, is a really great resource. Yes, and I've been lucky to find a couple friends through there, and it's been really enriching, honestly. And like a couple who have felt like I haven't been friends with you for like this short period of time. Like it feels like we've been friends for a very long time. And so things like that, ways that you can use the apps to your advantage, can be really, really helpful. Or like even if are dating, and then you just use that as a way to meet people, especially if you've just moved to a place, not to say that you have to start dating there or that you're necessarily single either, but using the apps, whether it's for like, finding friends or dates or both, like can be a really helpful way to just kind of throw your toe in there and see what comes of it. Especially if you've just moved, or it's really hard if you're working from home to like just go meet people, or it's not necessarily your vibe to just go out in public and like be really comfortable just rolling solo sometimes, which I get that for sure. It might be a process and kind of getting yourself to be a little more comfortable with that too. But yeah, there's so many ideas. And so we'd love to hear more of y'all's ideas out there too. Feel free to send them our way via our social media or what have you. Any other ideas from y'all about building community or
It's not an
otherwise?
idea, but it's a song that keeps coming up in my head, which is a Jack Johnson song from long ago. And it's like, we're always better when we're together. And it's such a
Oh,
sweet song. And I just think that kind of in closing here, before we do our kind of sign off stuff, it's like, we're always better when we're together, but you get to decide what that together looks, feels like, how, when, where, all of that. But I think the key sentiment here is that we are, better when we feel like we belong and we connected. And so a little call out to Jack Johnson there, my old high school fave. But in closing, we want you to be able to find Paola and all of her amazing offerings. And as mentioned, she has her awesome practice here in Austin. They support people in Texas, but then also in New York as well. And so, Paola, please share how we can find you or how they can find you, because we know where you are, girl. So share with
no,
them
absolutely.
how they can find you in your
Absolutely.
practice.
So we're on Instagram and Facebook. I haven't been brave enough to get on TikTok eventually, maybe. But we also have a wonderful website that our marketing bestie created for us, and that's the best way to, contact us and get a hold of us. And we talked a lot about our mission, but it's mainly through social media that, we try to share and uplift the voices of those who are passionate about social justice and community care. And, we have blogs, tips, and resources, both in English and in Spanish, for anybody who's interested in like mental health stuff. But we definitely, we're sprinkling in a little bit more about what we do in the community, the things that we're interested in, and I think people are interested in like how we spend our time. And I'm like, well, we're people too, right? Like we have fun, we do other things instead of just, doing therapy. And I think that's one of the cool ways, again, to be connected to our community, because that's where we want to show up. This is where we live. This is where we want to strengthen and potentially, continue to spread the reach. And so, yeah, just connect with us if you want to collaborate with us, if you want therapy from us. There's 6 of us, and so we're all happy to help. Yeah.
Group of wonderful, wonderful humans. Can't recommend your practice enough. And Paula, we're going to include it in the show notes, but what are the handles and what is your website that people can find you at specifically?
For all of them, it's Ortiz Therapy Group. So ORTIZ Therapy Group. That's the handle on Instagram. It's the name of the page on Facebook, and that's our website too. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Amazing.
Well, thank you for being part of our community, Paola. We're so happy that we got to speak with you today, and we just really appreciated all of your tips and insight and experience that you shared, and look forward to our next conversation and next hangout.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun talking to y'all too. So always happy to do it.
Yes, always. Yes, thank you for being our community pioneer here. And we'll be excited to talk with everyone next time.